Hi, I'm Bryony Rose, and I am the International Director for Yext Business. And I have just done a talk on the rise of AI searches. So thinking about how can brands get prepared to make sure that their data is surfacing in large language models, particularly given that we've been traditionally from a digital perspective focusing on things like Google and social media, etc. But now with the rise of ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, Perplexity, and I think a lot of people have their favorites as well, it's really encouraged consumers to have a dialogue, have a conversation, and search for the things that they want with much more detail, and also to share information about themselves with these large language models too. So it's much more complicated than just, pizza near me, or, where is my nearest Apple store, for example. One of my good friends, Elizabeth, she was recently looking for some plants, and normally she would go to authorities on that, Gardener's World or whatever it is. And she was searching on Google and it was taking a bit too long. So she went to ChatGPT, and what I thought was fascinating was rather than just look for, plants or plants that don't need watering too much because I'm away, she gave it an entire paragraph, her age, where she lives, that she has a south-facing terrace, all of these things. And because I'm really interested in big data and how enterprise businesses are structuring their data to be ready for those kind of queries, it made me think, wow, there is subjective things in there, complex things in there, some branded, some unbranded. She hadn't decided which business she'd go with or which plants. So really trying to dig in and explore that and understand how businesses can get ready for it. And I think another important topic associated with that is the notion of it being very, very hyperlocal. And also when you're searching on AI, what do you then do when you found what you need? How do you then get it? So back to that hyperlocal idea, if she'd been given some plant ideas and then she was given a garden center to go to. But in ChatGPT, she couldn't necessarily get there. She had to go back to Google, click on the website, etc., and make that transaction. And I think it's marrying those two things together. We've got to still be data ready for traditional search, but also large language models. And then I think finally the extension of that. What does the future of this possibly look like? And we briefly chatted about demographics because I'm a millennial. So I was one of the first groups to come into my formative years with the likes of streaming and social media and the first phones. Gen Z are now digital native. They were scrolling and zooming in on iPads from being very, very tiny. And then the next generation, which I think is really fascinating, is the Gen Alphas. And they're going to be AI native, that will be one of the first ways that they search. And I think that really challenges traditional marketing values because they won't be as influenced by TV or a billboard or anything like that. Even I don't have TV adverts now. So I think that's the other element to it as well. So lots to unpack, but it was more of a food for thought. These are some trends we're seeing. Here's some adoption in South Africa for AI, and what can we do about it? How can businesses get ready? And Yext actually has a product that helps with AI visibility too, which we're very excited about and bringing to this market. One of the first things was to think about it as data. So your AI strategy is ultimately your data strategy because AI is a data scientist. You can't pay to be, the top result, for example, when you search. So what I was suggesting is that they start thinking about having knowledge graph technology within their organizations. Now, what that basically means, it's a term coined by Google, and it means having a relational database that can take all of these millions of facts about your brand and appropriately structure them and then serve them effectively to large language models. And there's a few different companies that can support on things like this. Because once you've got your data ready to serve large language models, you can keep building that, then you can get ahead. And the second thing I also said was the good thing about AI is if you ask AI what it thinks it needs, to surface data or where it got its information from, that's another way you could think about it. It's very clear and it tells you. So from a hyperlocal perspective for a brand that, that's, be it in fins or retail or food, myriad of different industries, actually what they're doing is collating different pieces of information and data from different sources. And those sources are things like social media and Google and traditional searches, but also smaller publications. So I told businesses to really think about a tool that helps create consistency for them across all those different touch points, because that's what AI likes. It likes to see if it's about to surface something, that if it checks everywhere where that information might be, it's all the same. And then I also said to start thinking about your website in a bit of a different way. If your website, you'll already struggle if your website's not crawlable from Google, but you will particularly struggle with large language models if you do not have the right kind of schema, structured data, canonical. There's a lot of technical things, but that's getting even more important now than it ever was before. And the final thing I'll say on that, which I find fascinating, is I think it was a Wall Street Journal article that was saying, what's the logical end point of what the website will look like in 5 years' time? And it may not be a consumer-facing thing. It may not be something that you go and you scroll and you use the e-com site and you click on. It may be that your website becomes a data source for large language models, because the large language models can let you do that full customer journey within their own experience. So they were the main things that I said to be aware of and to start thinking about and working with appropriate providers for. I feel, for just to anecdotally bring it back to myself, it's very hard to reach me with a TV advert now, because I've chosen to pay for the privilege of streaming everything so that you can't reach me with that method. And I think when you're considering the Gen Z generation as well, I think it's something like 30 to 40% of Gen Zers will find a brand for the first time on something like TikTok. So I think I would say it's definitely about listening, paying attention, particularly to these new generations. And I was speaking to a finance brand in the UK a few weeks ago who was saying, what video content do I create for mortgages and for savings accounts? Like, that's boring. And also from a trust perspective, if they think we've done it and we're saying, oh, our mortgage is the best, they'll feel like, oh, that's not real. That's not informative to me. So I think you're right in identifying that, particularly for industries like fins, actually, it's a really complicated thing, but they know that medium is important. It's starting there. Is it potentially even using customers, thinking of it in a different way? How can we create that content that we know resonates with this generation, but that actually feels still trustworthy and relevant? Because just on the skepticism point as well in the large language models, I think millennials and above will have a bit more not skepticism in necessarily using it. It doesn't mean to say they won't adopt it, but in terms of being confident about the answer that is returned, I think we still interrogate it more. And that's actually what ChatGPT and the rest want. They want you to try and break it. When they first launched it, that's what they wanted. Please tell us we're wrong, give us more data, etc. So it's a self-feeding, learning model. But there's been a lot of studies to suggest that Gen Z are more trusting of it. They're very trusting of what they see on TikTok, and they're more trusting of the answers they get from large language models than previous generations have been. So I think the same principles of, like SEO principles, for example, of authority, trust, expertise in the content you create, it's not necessarily about creating a huge amount more, but it is about creating content with those themes in mind, I think, I would say.